My name is Daniel Rivera, 45 years old, an electrical engineer living in New York City. Life had always been predictable: long hours at work, meticulous attention to circuits, and a comfortable routine returning to our 20th floor apartment. I lived with my wife, Maria, and our 2 children, Sophia and Adrian. We were nestled above the city's chaos, our balcony offering views of the glittering skyline. It was a comforting illusion of safety, one that was about to shatter. The first whispers came from across the globe, a mysterious illness spreading rapidly through China. News anchors spoke in calm, measured tones, but my instincts stirred uneasily. As a prepper, raised by a father who valued foresight, I couldn't ignore the signs. Systems, whether mechanical or societal, fail if one component breaks. The words, virus, and rapid infection, hit me like an electric jolt. That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, scrolling through leaked videos and articles. Streets choked with staggering, bloodied figures. People dismissed them as hoaxes, marketing stunts. But the jerky movements, the vacant eyes, the unnatural aggression, I recognized the threat immediately. Maria, sensing my tension, tried to reassure both of us. "It's just overseas," she whispered. "The government will manage it." I shook my head. By the time authorities acted, the danger would be here. She didn't argue, only squeezed my hand in quiet understanding. We had long prepared for emergencies, but nothing like this. The next morning, I knocked on our neighbor's door. Kevin and Lily, a young couple in their mid-20s, full of energy and hope, looked at me as I explained the emerging crisis. Their eyes widened when I showed them the footage of the infected. Fear replaced disbelief. "We don't have anywhere else to go," Kevin said softly. "If it gets bad here, we're trapped." "Then help me prepare," I said firmly. "We fortify this apartment and make it a fortress." That day began a flurry of planning. I inventoried my prepper supplies: canned beans, rice, pasta, water, medical kits, flashlights, batteries, and solar chargers. Not enough for long-term survival, but enough to gain a head start. Kevin and I plotted trips to nearby stores before panic spread. That morning, we left early, masks on, gloves in our pockets. Streets seemed normal, but an undercurrent of tension lingered. Supermarkets were busy, but the first signs of hoarding were visible. We loaded 2 carts with canned goods, bottled water, powdered milk, and medicine. Back at the apartment, we carried it all to the 20th floor, sweat running down our backs, while Maria and Lily organized the supplies. Sophia and Adrian helped stack lighter items, turning the chore into a game. That night, I bolted metal shelving against the front door and reinforced hinges and frames. Every entrance became a project. Broken concrete blocks were stacked as extra barricades. The clang of metal and scrape of stone felt like armor against an approaching storm. The news worsened each day. The virus spread to Europe, and then the US videos from Los Angeles and Chicago showed chaos, people chased by those who were once human. Authorities urged residents to stay home, but panic gripped the population. Shelves emptied overnight. I was grateful we had prepared, though the thought of dwindling supplies gnawed at me. Days blurred into preparation. Windows were covered, gaps sealed with duct tape and blankets. I rerouted some electrical wiring to a portable generator. The children watched DVDs on a laptop, oblivious to the tension in the air. Every distant scream, every guttural moan from the streets below, reminded us that the danger was real. Then came our first encounter. Kevin and I ventured to a nearby pharmacy. Streets were littered with debris and abandoned vehicles. Around the corner, 3 infected figures staggered, their clothes bloodied, faces twisted with hunger. Kevin whispered a curse. We hid behind a car, holding our breath as one turned its head, sniffing. Heart pounding, we retreated slowly. The pharmacy was unreachable. Returning home empty-handed, Maria hugged me tightly. "We'll make do," I whispered, though fear and calculation raced through my mind. Life in the apartment had changed. We cleaned, cooked, maintained barricades, and tried to inject small moments of normalcy. The kids drew by flashlight, sometimes laughter echoing despite the chaos. But survival demanded vigilance. One night, pounding shook our barricaded door. Weapons in hand, we froze. Outside, desperate voices demanded our food. These were not the infected, but humans driven to desperation. Kevin and I held our ground. Then came a low, guttural moan from the hallway. The strangers retreated, and we realized just how dangerous people had become. Weeks stretched into a blur of rationing, scavenging, and fortifying. Every outing risked confrontation with the infected or desperate humans. Yet we endured. The first wave had arrived, and we had survived. This was only the beginning. The morning after our first encounter with the desperate intruders, the urgency to fortify our apartment intensified. I mapped out every vulnerable point: doors, windows, vents, and even the balcony access. The 20-story elevation gave us an advantage, but no building was completely secure. Every barrier we constructed had to be methodical, reinforced, and foolproof. Kevin and I began with the main entrance. We reinforced the metal shelving units with steel rods scavenged from a nearby construction site. Each bolt we drove in was deliberate, every screw a measure of safety. Lily and Maria worked tirelessly inside, organizing food and water, creating an inventory system to ensure we knew exactly how much we had and how long it would last. The children helped by stacking lighter items and keeping count, turning a grim task into a semblance of normalcy. Windows were next. We measured, sawed, and cut plywood sheets to fit snugly against the glass, sealing edges with duct tape. I improvised additional metal plates from discarded signage, using them to create a layered defense. Air vents were stuffed with heavy cloth, and all balcony access points were bolted shut. We even placed furniture strategically near doors to create inner barricades, allowing us to retreat and defend if necessary. Every night, I patrolled the apartment quietly, checking bolts, listening for strange sounds, and observing shadows. The children learned to move silently, and even Sophia, only 10, took pride in reporting any unusual noises. Kevin and I practiced defensive maneuvers, moving in coordination, signaling silently, and preparing contingency plans in case a breach occurred. During this period, news updates became scarce, unreliable, and fragmented. Internet outages were frequent, forcing us to rely on battery-powered radios. Reports of city-wide outbreaks and violent looting trickled in. Occasionally, snippets of survivor broadcasts reached us. Stories of entire streets overtaken, families lost, and the military struggling to contain infected zones. Fear gnawed at us, but it also fueled our preparation. One afternoon, we ventured to a nearby hardware store, carefully choosing our timing. The streets were eerily silent, littered with debris and abandoned vehicles. We moved cautiously, scanning for threats. In the store, shelves were half empty, but we managed to gather nails, steel braces, additional plywood, and rope. As we exited, a figure lurked near a corner, half shrouded in shadow. It moved oddly, its head twitching unnaturally. My pulse spiked. Kevin and I froze, then retreated silently, bags of supplies clutched to our chests. The infected had become bolder, more numerous, and even a moment's lapse could be fatal. Back in the apartment, Maria cooked a hearty stew using our limited fresh supplies. The aroma was a brief reprieve from the tension that had settled over our fortress. Sophia and Adrian laughed while helping set the table, their innocence a fragile light in our dark world. That night, I recorded a detailed plan. Each barricade, each supply location, escape routes, and zones for defense. The apartment had transformed from a simple home into a living, breathing stronghold, a testament to our will to survive. The psychological toll was heavy. We argued at times, small disagreements magnified by stress. Yet, every debate ended with compromise. Survival demanded cooperation, and in our fortress, unity was as crucial as steel and concrete. Kevin and I took turns patrolling at night, ensuring no infected or desperate humans breached our defenses. Each patrol was an exercise in vigilance and endurance, reminding us that danger lurked both outside and within our walls. As days turned into weeks, routines solidified. We woke early, checked supplies, fortified weak points, and prepared meals with careful rationing. We rotated lookout duties, using binoculars to monitor nearby streets. The city had fallen silent, punctuated only by distant screams or the unsettling moans of the infected. Life in the apartment was a careful balance between hope and fear, preparation and tension, normalcy and survival. By the third week, our stockpiles were holding, but the threat of depletion was real. Kevin and I knew we had to venture further into the city for supplies, medicine, canned food, batteries, and whatever else we could salvage. Maria prepared the children for our absence, emphasizing the importance of silence and staying inside. Their wide eyes reflected a mixture of excitement and fear. Even at their ages, they understood the stakes. We dressed in layers, gloves and masks tightly fitted, and carried backpacks filled with essentials, water, medical kits, and improvised weapons. The streets outside the apartment were eerily quiet, littered with abandoned vehicles, overturned trash bins, and the occasional personal belongings scattered in haste. The air was thick with a metallic scent, a mixture of decay and smoke from distant fires. Our first destination was a nearby pharmacy. As we moved cautiously, the occasional moan from the infected echoed through empty streets, sending shivers down my spine. Every corner, every shadow, could conceal a threat. Kevin signaled silently, and we slowed, scanning rooftops and alleyways, eyes darting for sudden movements. Halfway to the pharmacy, movement caught my attention, a figure staggering across the street. Its head twisted unnaturally, eyes blank, clothing soaked in dark stains. My heart hammered. Kevin gripped my arm, and we both ducked behind a wrecked car. The creature sniffed the air, then continued its erratic shuffle, unaware of us. Exhaling silently, we resumed our cautious trek. Inside the pharmacy, shelves were in partial disarray. Some items had been looted, but we managed to secure antibiotics, painkillers, baby formula, and several canned goods. The adrenaline coursing through me sharpened my focus. Every second spent inside was a risk. The infected could converge at any moment. On our exit, we froze. The moaning had grown louder, closer. 3 figures lurked near the pharmacy's front, drawn by our presence. Kevin whispered, "Back the way we came." I shook my head subtly. We had to move forward to avoid being trapped. Heart pounding, we sprinted across the street, weaving between abandoned cars and debris. One lunged at Kevin, its fingers grazing his jacket. I swung my crowbar, striking it down as we bolted for the next alley. Panic surged, but training and instinct guided us. Breathless and tense, we returned to our building with the supplies intact. Maria met us at the door, her hands trembling as she helped us carry the bags inside. Sophia and Adrian peeked from behind furniture, wide-eyed. We emptied the backpacks, organized items, and counted our spoils. For a moment, the apartment felt safe again. That night, as I patrolled the barricades, I reflected on the fragility of our position. Every trip outside was a gamble, every sound a potential threat. The infected were relentless, and other humans, hungry, desperate, unpredictable, posed just as much danger. Yet, our preparations and vigilance had kept us alive, and we had survived the first true test of our fortified home. Life inside our fortified apartment began to settle into a tense routine. The barricades held strong, supplies were carefully rationed, and the children adapted to the new normal. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the psychological strain began to manifest. Tensions flared over minor disagreements: who would cook, which supplies should be prioritized, or how long the children could be allowed to play near windows. Fear magnified even the smallest conflicts, reminding us that survival was as much a mental battle as a physical one. Maria and Lily worked tirelessly, preparing meals from our limited stores. We learned to make simple dishes stretch over several days, combining rice, canned beans, and dehydrated vegetables into meals that could sustain 6 people with minimal waste. Each evening, we gathered around the table, savoring food not just for sustenance but for the comfort of routine. Sophia and Adrian colored pictures of a world outside, their imagination a brief escape from our confined reality. I spent hours patrolling the barricades and checking structural weaknesses. Kevin and I devised signal systems, hand signs, and silent cues for emergencies. Every night, we reviewed our plan of defense, ensuring that every possible breach was accounted for. The children, surprisingly, adapted well, learning quickly to stay out of sight and move quietly if necessary. One afternoon, Maria and I argued quietly over rationing. She wanted to extend portions for the children, while I insisted on strict measurements to ensure longevity. We sat at opposite ends of the table, voices low but tense. Kevin, ever pragmatic, stepped in, mediating a compromise. We could slightly adjust the kids' portions but maintain strict adult rations. The small victory highlighted our need for teamwork and communication. Survival demanded collaboration above all. Venturing outside remained dangerous. On one outing, Kevin and I navigated a series of alleyways toward a warehouse rumored to contain food supplies. The streets were eerily silent, punctuated only by distant moans and the occasional clatter of debris. We moved carefully, avoiding open areas and scanning for movement. Inside the warehouse, we discovered a stash of canned goods and bottled water left untouched by looters. Our relief was short-lived. As we turned to leave, the groaning of several infected figures grew louder, echoing off the walls. Our exit was tense, sprinting between shadows and abandoned equipment, each step calculated to avoid attracting attention. We made it back with minimal supplies and our lives intact. Night brought a fragile sense of safety, though sleep was often elusive. Every noise outside sent the family into a cautious alertness. We practiced silent drills, teaching the children how to respond if the barricades were breached. Our fortress had become both a haven and a prison, and we were constantly aware of the delicate balance between comfort and danger. As weeks progressed, our unity strengthened despite occasional friction. Each challenge, rationing, fortification, supply runs, became a test of character and cooperation. The apartment, once a home, had transformed into a fortress, a symbol of resilience amid the chaos outside. And as we huddled together each night, listening to the faint moans of the infected below, we understood that survival required more than preparation. It demanded courage, adaptability, and unwavering vigilance. By the 5th week, the infected had become bolder, and the streets were no longer just dangerous because of them. Desperate humans, starving and frantic, now posed as much threat as the undead. The tension outside was palpable, and every trip we made required meticulous planning. Kevin and I started leaving at dawn, moving swiftly through quiet streets, scanning for signs of both zombies and hostile humans. One day, while scavenging a partially looted grocery store, we encountered a small group of survivors who had armed themselves with makeshift weapons. Their eyes were wild with fear and desperation. They demanded our supplies, threatening violence if we didn't comply. I held my ground, gripping the crowbar tightly. Kevin positioned himself behind me, ready to defend. The standoff lasted minutes that felt like hours, both sides calculating, waiting for the other to make a move. Eventually, they backed down, disappearing into the shadows. The encounter left us shaken, reminding us that human desperation could be as deadly as the infected. Back in the apartment, Maria reinforced the barricades while the kids played quietly. We shared what had happened with them in simplified terms, ensuring they understood the need for caution without instilling panic. Each incident sharpened our awareness and highlighted the importance of vigilance. Rationing became stricter. Every meal was planned to extend our supplies as long as possible. We used a detailed inventory system, recording each item consumed and replenished. Nights were filled with patrols, drills, and constant monitoring of the building's structural integrity. Even the slightest sound, a distant scream, a moan, or a bang, could trigger a full alert, sending hearts racing. Despite the mounting pressure, moments of normalcy persisted. Sophia and Adrian continued to draw, Kevin and Lily found ways to keep spirits high, and Maria and I shared quiet conversations, planning future actions and discussing contingencies. It was a delicate balance of fear and resilience, with each day testing our physical endurance and mental fortitude. The city outside was changing rapidly. Fires burned in distant blocks, abandoned vehicles littered intersections, and the occasional body served as a grim reminder of the dangers lurking beyond our fortified walls. Each supply run was a calculated risk, each encounter a lesson in survival. We learned to adapt, improvise, and remain calm under pressure, understanding that our fortress was both a sanctuary and a fragile bubble in an increasingly hostile world. Weeks into our self-imposed isolation, the need for supplies forced us to undertake a major expedition across several city blocks. Kevin and I planned meticulously, mapping our route to minimize exposure. Maria stayed behind to oversee the children and maintain the fortress, while Lily joined us to manage the load. Backpacks were packed with essentials: food, water, first aid kits, tools, and improvised weapons. The streets were eerily quiet. Abandoned vehicles, trash, and debris littered our path. Every shadow seemed alive, and every sound, clattering metal, distant moans, set our nerves on edge. As we approached an old supermarket rumored to contain untouched supplies, we spotted movement at the far end of the street. 3 infected staggered toward us, their eyes blank, movements jerky. I motioned for Kevin and Lily to take cover behind a derelict car. We waited, breaths held, as the creatures sniffed the air. Then, seemingly distracted by a sound behind them, they wandered off. Our hearts were racing, adrenaline surging as we approached the supermarket. Inside, the shelves were partially emptied, but there were still enough canned goods, powdered milk, and bottles of water to replenish our stock. We worked quickly, loading our backpacks and checking each aisle for overlooked supplies. As we exited, the noise of shuffling footsteps greeted us. A small group of desperate humans emerged from an alley, armed with makeshift weapons and wild eyes. They demanded our supplies, their voices tinged with hysteria. Kevin and I positioned ourselves strategically, crowbar and bat at the ready. Negotiations were impossible, they were too consumed by fear and hunger. Tension escalated, and one of them lunged forward. I swung my crowbar instinctively, and chaos erupted. Screams, shouts, and the guttural moans of nearby infected filled the street. One of the survivors fell, wounded, as the others scattered in panic. With the immediate threat gone, we sprinted down the street, backpacks heavy, eyes darting for additional dangers. 3 infected lurked at the corner, drawn by the commotion. I swung my crowbar, forcing a path through the narrow alley. Kevin and Lily followed closely, and we managed to reach our building without injury, though hearts pounded and sweat dripped down our faces. Back inside, Maria and the kids greeted us with anxious eyes. We quickly unloaded supplies, recounting the harrowing events. Every confrontation, every encounter, reinforced the harsh reality: survival required constant vigilance, careful planning, and the ability to act decisively under pressure. That night, we reinforced the barricades, checking every door and window. The events of the day lingered in our minds, a stark reminder that the city outside had become a battlefield where both the infected and desperate humans were formidable threats. We ate a modest meal, our nerves still raw, and huddled together, drawing strength from each other. The fortress felt safer within, yet every heartbeat reminded us that danger could strike at any moment. After the harrowing expedition, the psychological weight of survival began to settle heavily on all of us. Each day inside the apartment was a delicate balance between maintaining routines and coping with fear. The children, Sophia and Adrian, occasionally asked about the world outside, their curiosity mixed with unease. We tried to answer honestly without instilling panic, explaining that the streets were dangerous and that their safety depended on staying inside and following rules. Kevin and I conducted regular fortification checks, reinforcing doors, windows, and vents. We installed additional metal braces and improvised alarms with cans and string, alerting us to any movement outside. The generator became crucial, powering lights, a small heater, and essential electronics. I spent hours maintaining it, checking fuel levels, and ensuring it was in top condition, knowing that a single failure could leave us vulnerable. Rationing had become routine. Every meal was measured, and food was distributed carefully to ensure everyone received enough while maintaining longevity. Maria and Lily cooked creatively, stretching basic ingredients into meals that were both edible and nutritious. The children helped where they could, learning to respect the importance of each portion and the need to conserve resources. Tensions occasionally flared. Fear, exhaustion, and confinement heightened irritability. One evening, Kevin and I disagreed over whether we should venture out for more supplies or wait. His argument was rooted in caution, mine in necessity. The debate was intense, voices low but strained, each aware of the stakes. Eventually, we reached a compromise. We would wait until daylight and take a shorter route to minimize exposure. Sleep was often elusive. Every noise, a distant moan, a scraping sound from the hallway, could trigger a surge of adrenaline. We practiced drills with the children, teaching them how to respond to potential breaches. These exercises were both educational and exhausting, but each one reinforced the sense of preparedness. We also explored creative ways to pass the time and maintain morale. Sophia and Adrian created drawings of imagined safe worlds, and sometimes we played board games by the light of the generator. Small moments of normalcy provided mental relief and strengthened our unity. The city outside remained a constant threat. Fires burned in distant blocks, vehicles were abandoned mid-street, and the occasional shadowy figure reminded us that the infected were everywhere. Each day reinforced that survival demanded not only preparation but also mental resilience, adaptability, and teamwork. As nights fell, we huddled together, aware that our fortress was safe for now but that the world outside remained unpredictable and dangerous. By the 8th week, our supplies were dwindling faster than anticipated. Despite careful rationing, the reality of limited resources became unavoidable. Maria and Lily had stretched ingredients as far as possible, but we now faced the daunting prospect of venturing further into the city to restock essentials, knowing the dangers had multiplied. We planned meticulously, studying maps of nearby blocks and identifying potential sources of food, water, and medicine. Kevin and I agreed on a strict schedule: leave at dawn to avoid most of the infected, move quietly, and maintain communication through hand signals. The weight of our backpacks reminded us of the responsibility we carried, not just for ourselves, but for the entire household. The streets were a graveyard of the old city. Abandoned vehicles blocked intersections, scattered belongings littered the sidewalks, and distant fires cast ominous glows over deserted streets. Every movement, every shadow, became a potential threat. We passed by a small grocery store, only to see it looted and burned, a stark reminder that the panic outside spared nothing. Halfway to our destination, we encountered a group of desperate humans. They were gaunt, ragged, and armed with crude weapons. Their eyes darted nervously, landing on us with a mixture of suspicion and hunger. They demanded our supplies, their voices trembling with desperation. Kevin and I positioned ourselves defensively, crowbar and bat ready. Negotiation was futile. The standoff was tense, every second stretched by the weight of potential violence. Eventually, the group retreated, leaving behind a sense of unease and the reminder that human desperation was as dangerous as the infected themselves. We reached an old warehouse rumored to contain untouched supplies. Inside, we discovered crates of canned goods, bottles of water, and basic medical supplies. Relief washed over us, but we remained cautious, aware that the slightest noise could attract unwanted attention. Loading our backpacks carefully, we prepared for the return journey. On the way back, a moaning figure appeared in the alley ahead, blocking our path. Its movements were erratic, jerky, and unnervingly human yet grotesque. We ducked behind a car, hearts pounding, silently counting down the seconds until it passed. As soon as it wandered away, we sprinted the remaining distance, adrenaline fueling every step. Returning to the apartment, we were exhausted, sweaty, and tense. Maria greeted us with anxious eyes, rushing to help unload supplies. Sophia and Adrian peeked from behind furniture, relief evident on their faces. We quickly organized the new stock, updating our inventory and ensuring everything was securely stored. That night, we reinforced the barricades once more, adding extra layers of metal and concrete. The apartment felt like a fragile oasis, a temporary haven in a world that had become unpredictable and hostile. Exhaustion settled over us, but we knew that each day brought new challenges. Survival required constant vigilance, careful planning, and the mental fortitude to endure a reality that had become both terrifying and unpredictable. Several days after our high-tension outing, an unsettling silence settled over the building. It was the kind of quiet that raises the hairs on your neck and makes every shadow seem alive. We were reinforcing barricades, checking the integrity of windows, doors, and vents, when a sudden, sharp crash echoed from the front entrance. My heart leapt. Something, or someone, was attempting to breach our fortress. Kevin and I grabbed weapons, my crowbar, his bat, and moved toward the sound. Maria ushered the children into the farthest room, instructing them to stay silent and hidden. Lily stayed close, clutching a makeshift hammer. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the apartment floor amplified by fear. The front door shuddered under the force of the attack. Moans filtered through the metal barricade. My mind raced, considering the possible threats. Were they desperate humans, or the infected who had learned to find us? Every second felt like an eternity as we assessed the situation. A shadow fell across the door. The metal groaned under repeated impacts. I signaled Kevin, and we positioned ourselves strategically. Another crash, followed by a guttural growl, made it clear they were infected. Not just one, but multiple, testing the limits of our defenses. Kevin and I moved swiftly, using crowbars and makeshift weapons to create distance, striking each figure that lunged at the barricade. The noise was deafening, mingling with the shrill cries of the children's fear restrained by Maria's steady voice. One infected managed to tear a small section of the metal shelf, giving it partial entry. I swung with all my strength, pushing it back and reinforcing the barrier with additional concrete blocks hastily dragged from storage. Hours felt like minutes as we fought to maintain control. The apartment trembled under repeated attacks. Kevin coordinated movements with me, signaling silent cues as we blocked entry points and diverted the attacker's attention. Every instinct honed over weeks of preparation was in play, each decision critical. Eventually, the attackers withdrew, frustrated by the strength of our fortress. Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. We checked every barricade, every window, ensuring no infected had slipped through unnoticed. Maria comforted the children, reassuring them while hiding her own exhaustion and fear. That night, sleep was nearly impossible. Every distant moan, every scrape of debris on the street, reminded us of the danger lurking beyond our walls. The breach had taught us a crucial lesson. No fortress was impervious, and constant vigilance was our only guarantee of survival. We reinforced, revised plans, and mentally prepared for the reality that such encounters would recur, testing our endurance, courage, and unity at every turn. Weeks had passed since the breach, and the psychological toll weighed heavily on all of us. Sleep remained fragmented, and the city outside had grown ever more perilous. Yet, amidst the fear and scarcity, a faint glimmer of hope arrived. A radio broadcast, weak and intermittent, crackled through our battery-powered receiver, delivering news that seemed almost unreal. Scientists were developing a vaccine, and certain areas of the government were regaining control. Maria hugged me tightly as we listened, relief mingling with disbelief. The children peered curiously at the device, sensing the shift in our emotions. Kevin and Lily exchanged cautious smiles, a rare moment of levity in the midst of the ongoing chaos. It wasn't a solution yet, but it was a sign that the world outside was not entirely lost. We continued our routines, rationing, and fortification, but now with renewed determination. Each supply run, each barricade, and each day of vigilance felt purposeful. The knowledge that a potential cure existed gave our efforts new meaning. We still faced dangers. The infected roamed the streets, and desperate humans remained a threat, but the thought of recovery, of survival beyond mere endurance, strengthened our resolve. We organized our remaining supplies, prioritizing essential items and preparing for longer-term survival until more concrete news arrived. The children's laughter became a more frequent sound in the apartment, a reminder of the life we were protecting and the future we hoped to reclaim. We shared stories of the world before the outbreak, weaving memories with lessons learned from our experiences, ensuring the children retained a sense of normalcy and hope. Patrols and drills continued, but there was a subtle shift. Our actions felt less like mere survival tactics and more like preparation for a return to some semblance of life beyond our fortress. Every barricade reinforced, every inventory checked, and every quiet night spent together became a testament to our resilience. Though cautious, we allowed ourselves to imagine a day when the city would begin to heal, when the streets would no longer echo with screams, and when the infected would be contained. The news of a vaccine, still in development, reminded us that even in the darkest times, humanity's ingenuity and perseverance could prevail. For the first time in weeks, sleep came easier, accompanied by dreams of a safer world and the hope that our family, our neighbors, and our community might survive to see it. The news of the vaccine gradually reached more regions, bringing a cautious sense of relief and optimism. Government broadcasts announced the containment of major outbreaks, and areas that were once overrun were being reclaimed. It was a slow process, but it signaled a turning point. Our fortress, once a haven of fear and survival, began to feel more like a home again. We continued our routines, patrols, drills, and rationing, but now with a new sense of purpose. Every action we took was preparation not just for defense, but for eventual reintegration into the world outside. Kevin and I ventured out cautiously, taking note of cleared streets and re-established supply chains. Shops that had once been looted were beginning to restock, and communities were cautiously emerging from isolation. The children, Sophia and Adrian, witnessed glimpses of normalcy, a neighbor cautiously tending a garden, a small group sharing food. These moments were tentative, but powerful reminders that life could return. Inside our apartment, we celebrated small victories. Each day without incident, each successful supply run, reinforced our confidence. The children laughed more freely, and Maria and Lily found joy in small household routines, preparing meals with renewed optimism and savoring each moment of safety. As weeks passed, the city slowly healed. The infected were contained, and the vaccine distribution began. We followed the broadcasts closely, noting which areas were considered safe and where survivors could cautiously begin to rebuild their lives. Our precautions, our unity, and our perseverance had kept us alive. The fortress had not only protected us physically but had strengthened our bonds, teaching resilience, courage, and the importance of community. One evening, as the sun set over the skyline, casting a warm glow through the apartment windows, we gathered on the balcony. The city below was no longer silent and foreboding. Smoke from distant fires had cleared, and faint signs of life, people walking cautiously, rebuilding structures, tending to small gardens, reminded us that humanity endured. Sophia and Adrian leaned against Maria, eyes wide with wonder at the world slowly returning to life. Kevin and Lily held hands, sharing a quiet smile. I watched my family, the neighbors who had become like family, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. We had survived, not merely by chance, but through preparation, courage, and unity. The nightmare of the infected city was behind us. The virus had tested us, stretched our endurance, and reshaped our lives. Yet in the aftermath, we discovered strength, hope, and the unbreakable bond of family and community. Life was beginning anew, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, we dared to dream of a future where safety, laughter, and light returned to our world.